Alrighty, y'all, welcome to Ellis Mowers. We are now that time of year where we're actually going to revisit a couple of projects that I deemed not worth fixing at some point. One of these is this John Deere. Y'all saw me do a couple of part videos on this, and we found out that one of the cylinders had a blown connecting rod on it, the one on the right side. So it's just been kind of camping out back here in the back for a little while. I actually took the deck off of it to use on a different lawnmower, just kind of in a pinch. But I still do have a 42-inch deck that'll fit right on this. I just have to put a deck belt on it, so that is not an issue. And I got the hood for it over there. The hood's pretty busted up, but it's still functional as a hood. And I have some front tires for it. I'm going to take it off of this, well, Craftsman-esque type mower that I'm just parting out here. So I didn't part it out to the point that I can't use it, which is good. Again, this is the one that's got 800 and some odd hours on it. The engine is partially blown. So seat's pretty tore up, but the transaxle still works. Steering's all right. I fixed the front axle, so we're good on that front too. There's actually a fuel solenoid that came off of something. I don't know where that came from. Oh well. So this one I've decided, I've been toying around with if I even wanted to try to replace it. I am going to replace it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with 14.5 horsepower Briggs. So that'll be kind of fun to work on. And also, I guess what I'm going to do is figure out how to make this fuel pump work on it too. I could drill a hole in my valve cover on the 14.5, and hopefully that'll give me enough vacuum pressure in order for it to run the fuel pump. It'd be kind of an experiment. I've got plenty of valve covers and stuff for a Briggs, so, or I'll just poach the vacuum from somewhere else on it. I'm not sure yet. That's going to be kind of the one wild card that I'm going to have on it, where I'm going to find the vacuum for a mechanical fuel pump. But that's it, really. Everything else seems to be in decent shape. So what I'm going to do is use this, obviously. Here's the 14.5 I'm going to use. I wish I could figure out how to gravity feed this thing. I did a John Deere. I converted it from a 13 horse a long time ago, or from like a 19.5 to a 13 horse flathead a long time ago. I don't remember in the least how I did it, but we'll find out. We'll figure it out too. I wonder if I could potentially poach something off of this oil dipstick here for some pressure. I just need a little bit of pressure to run the mechanical fuel pump, which I can bolt right there. That's not an issue. Mounting it on this mower is not an issue at all. It's just the fact, or the John Deere is not an issue at all. The engine on this John Deere, that is. It's just a matter of how I get enough vacuum pressure in order to run it, you know. I've got a couple of these dipsticks, so I'm not terribly worried if I mess one up trying to fix it. For all I know, this is a complete 14.5 horse that runs. It's got good compression on it. Probably will have to put a carburetor on it because it's been sitting a little while. It's a 287707, so it's one of the good ones. Before the pre-intake, so I shouldn't have any issues with compression release and stuff like that on it. First order of business is I got to take this engine off of this lawnmower That way we can put it on that John Deere. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to take this engine off, which is fairly easy to do. It's really not too bad. Just disconnect your stator here and disconnect your, I guess it's a ground wire to the coil or something along those lines. You just disconnect those two, and we'll disconnect the starter nut and we'll just rip this thing right off of there. Also, we're going to disconnect the choke cable. We'll probably just take the coal carburetor off of it. Just disconnect the choke cable and all that good stuff on it. Which actually has already been done on this lawnmower. And the throttle cable, so I can just literally rip this thing off now. After I take those things off of that side. I'll put it on jack stands. I'll show you the 4 bolts underneath that you have to take out. It's best to use like a 1/2 inch impact to take it out. I think they're 9/16 inch or 5/8 inch bolts. We'll get to that when we get there. And we're also going to take this exhaust off for the time being, which that's another thing I'm going to have to figure out here too, is how I'm going to retrofit the exhaust on this mower. I don't think it's going to be terribly difficult to do, depending on where it mounts at, because I do have a lot of space and a lot of room down here to put it. So we'll see what happens. Again, this is just kind of more of an experiment thing. I'm already to the point, I want to put a Briggs in the Kohler, but I know that figuring out the wiring on this is going to be a little bit more difficult, considering that it is a going from a Kohler to a Briggs. One thing I do know though is I could rob a wiring harness potentially in order to make it work. We'll have to see though. Yeah, I could potentially rob a wiring harness. I've got a switch that'll work. And just change out the entire harness on this thing to make it work, because the wiring on the Kohler is a little bit different. Like I said, I got a wiring harness on this Briggs right here that might fit the bill for it, or it had a Briggs on it. Like I said, it might fit the bill for it. We'll have to see though. This is going to be kind of an experimental deal here to see what we can do. Anyways, I'll get off of that. But what I'm going to do next is rip that engine off. I'll have to figure out the exhaust and figure out a couple things. I don't think it'll be too terribly difficult though. Let me get the blue mower set up in there for us to take off the engine. Alrighty, let me show you what I'm doing. I hooked up my 2-jaw puller to this pulley. These MTD pulleys are horrendous trying to get off sometimes. This one is actually working for me, thank goodness, because I had one a few years ago. Holy moly, we had to cut it off. This one looks like it's been lubed with a little bit of oil over the course of time, so that's awesome. As you can see, I've turned the mower on its side. Always turn it on this side up with the right side down, and you'll be in good shape, because that way the oil doesn't get into the carburetor and into the intake and all that other stuff. So now I'm just taking my pullers and basically just ratcheting the thing out. And thank goodness it's coming, because I wouldn't know what the heck to do if it wasn't. Let me get an extension. Because I don't worry about that John Deere pulley coming off. I ain't worried about that at all. Alright, so that's as far as that's going to go. So we'll pull this off, which might prove to be a little difficult, but we'll get there. Alright, there we go. Awesome. Oh, double awesome. Because you don't need that spacer. That's just for MTD mowers. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure that it is only for MTD mowers. Cool. Oh, that's a sigh of relief. I thought I was going to have a time taking that off. All right. While I got it on its side, I'm not going to take the engine off like this because I don't want it falling to the ground and breaking anything. But here are your 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sometimes they've got a nut at the top that you have to put a wrench on whenever you take them out. Just depends on the age of the mower. I think this one has a mix of both because I think somebody might have worked on this one at some point. Let me get this thing back upright. I'm going to get under it, and we'll take the 4 bolts off, and we should just be able to lift this thing right out of here. I loosened the 4 bolts all around, 9/16 all around actually. So again, the throttle and the choke cable are already disconnected on this. I just had to disconnect the starter, the ignition coil, and the magneto, stator, excuse me. Ignition coil, magneto, same thing. Should just be able to lift this thing off now. Oh yeah. And also another thing, I did disconnect the exhaust, as you can see. I will likely reuse this exhaust on the John Deere. I hope it'll work. I think it will. Got a good pipe there. I just don't know what I have in terms of exhaust. I might have a John Deere exhaust sitting in the wings inside my stash in there. I'm not sure. We'll see if this MTD exhaust works though. This is pretty much all I'm going to do with this mower. I might save the seat just in case I need a seat and a couple other things. Transaxles are not worth saving on these. I got some good tires that I could put tubes in. That one actually holds air. And the steering mechanism's highly sought after, especially the shaft. So I'll keep that as well. I'll eventually part this thing out and scrap it once the season dies down and I catch up on some projects at the house. Now, next order of business, we're going to take the V-twin off of that John Deere. So let me get this thing out. Let me get this John Deere in and we'll roll on with it, taking the motor off of that. Alrighty, y'all, let me show you everything I've seen so far that we need to take off. Again, the starter nut here. And then there was a bolt that held on couple of bolts that held on the fuel pump bracket there that needed to go, and we'll probably end up taking the actual bolts off of the bracket and just bolt the pump directly to the new engine cover. Let's see what's next. This is the throttle, or the choke, excuse me. We can get the choke off here. I'm just going to take it off, intake and all. So, get the choke cable off. I'll just pop that back on for the moment. I would like to one day rebuild this engine because it's only got one blown connecting rod. And a guy here on YouTube, he's a little bit far away for me to just pop over and grab a spare V-twin that he has for parts by the name of Bronze Chicken. He offered me a V-twin for parts. He lives about 4 hours away from me, so I have to be out that way in order to really make it worthwhile. You know what I mean? So I took the throttle and the choke cable off. I won't need the choke cable for the 14.5, so I can get rid of that. And probably just put a regular throttle cable on this. A little bracket right here, or a little clip. And I think everything is disconnected from it that needs to be disconnected from it. The exhaust pipes go straight down into the muffler, so I think if I just take, let's see, is that just held on by 2 bolts? Take this bolt right here off, and then there's one on the other side. I think they're 10 mils. That should give me enough clearance to get this engine out. Then we'll have to see how the new one fits in there. And so that should allow us to get the exhaust pipes out. I'm going to take this fuel line off as well. And I'll get this fuel line off and clear it out of the way, and it will be ready for, should be ready to take out from underneath next. So some people in engine swaps are intimidating. They're really not too bad. It's more about the if you go from, let me just put it right there. There we go. If you go from one type of engine to another is where it can get kind of tricky, particularly with the wiring. So one more plug that I've got to unplug back here is the stator. So there we go. And I think everything else is self-contained. I have to, well, let's see, I have to fish the wiring for the, darn, I have to fish the wiring for the solenoid back through the engine somehow. That's not going to be easy. I might just unplug the harness and just bypass that portion of it, because those 2 wires go to the, well, I have to check the coil wire too. I'll get the engine cover off real quick, and we'll see what we have. Alright, y'all, I might have a little difficulty getting this out because the pulley, it doesn't seem like it wants to necessarily come off right now at this point. So what I'm going to do, spray a little bit of PV Blaster over onto it. Gonna let it soak a little bit. I'm hoping it just needs to be broken loose. I've already taken the drive belt off of it, so you know, Hopefully that'll allow it to work okay. That worked. Just need to knock it loose. Now, I should be able to take this thing off. Put you on this side, because I lift from this side. Bolt. All right. Now, see how this 14.5 sits. Ugh. It's gonna sit right there. So I think Alright, so I just put the throttle linkage on real quick just to see how everything would work. I think this is going to work okay. Looks like the exhaust will come down at a reasonable spot. Obviously I have to switch out the exhaust. Oh, here's that pipe. They made these things pretty universal, so let's see. Oh yeah, that pipe's gonna go right in there perfectly. So I just need to change out the muffler on it, and I should be good. Might have to drill a couple new brackets in order to get it in there, but that should be it. Maybe not. I have to see. Let's see. So it's got a little bit different setup. I got to figure out the choke situation for this thing. It doesn't seem like it wants to pull the choke on whenever I pull the throttle. Which that could be an easy fix, because I could literally just put the choke cable onto the carburetor and have it like the old school choke work like it's supposed to on it. That might be bent actually, I'm not sure. Or I could go the simple route. So the engine is on there. Let me figure out the whole wiring situation. And as soon as I do that, I'll get back to you. Obviously, I have a connector here. I wonder if it fits like so. No, because it's female to female. That won't work. But this is the stator. I'll probably plug that in after I attempt to crank this. just because I don't want to have any issues with it. And then I have to figure out, the biggest thing I have to figure out is this fuel pump situation, because I've got to get some, I got to source some vacuum from somewhere. And I don't know if I want to try and pick it off of the oil dipstick, because I know I'm going to need something in order for it to work. So a couple of hurdles I've got to overcome, nothing too terribly large, but the new engine is on, and so we are, I guess we're getting pretty close, so to speak. I just got to figure out the wiring, the wiring situations and stuff on it. Let me do that, and I'll get back to y'all in just a bit. Alright, so the engine swap's going smoothly so far. The easy part is done, basically. Now I've got to figure out the whole wiring situation and a couple other things, but we'll get down to that in just a second. What I got going on here, there's multiple mounting points on the front and the back of these things. So like you see, there's 3 different holes. On this side it went into the middle hole, and on this side it actually went in, there's only 2 holes, or it actually went into the far hole, excuse me. So I don't quite understand that. It's centered on the pulleys down below, so I guess it only goes one way depending on the type of engines that get put on these, but I didn't think that there were any differences. I was able to use self-tappers on the front ones. The ones in the back didn't hold because the original ones had nuts in them, and I guess it probably stripped it out. So I put nuts on the ones on the back. The other 2 seem to be pretty good. Now, I've already put the pulley back on too. The best thing to do is to slide the drive belt on and then match up your pulley keyway, and it just pops right back on. That was one of the easiest parts of the job here. Now the next order of business I've got to do is figure out the exhaust situation. I know that I had an exhaust for one of these at one point. I hope it did not throw it out. I'm going to check my riding mower stash to see if I've got it. If not, I think I'll be able to use that MTD exhaust I got right here. I think it'll bolt up fairly decently to this. Actually, it might be looks to be a little bit narrower, but let me see. Oh wow, it's leaking too. Looks to be a little narrower. I'll clean that off of my blanket there. It looks to be a little bit narrower than that current exhaust. So that's kind of the next order of business. The big wild card is just figuring out the situation with the fuel pump. I think what I'm going to do is attempt to, I think I'm going to drill out a little hole right here near the top of the crankcase, mount the fuel pump onto the engine, maybe back here, because either way I've got to get the fuel routed over to the carburetor over there. So I'm wondering if I could mount the fuel pump back there in the back behind the oil tube or the oil dipstick and be alright. I think I'm going to be able to get my crankcase pressure off of this, because on the newer ones, like if you've got a, what did I do, a D110 one time that had a 19.5, it has a different dipstick on it, but it had a little nipple out of the dipstick. And somehow, some way, I was able to actually adapt one of those dipsticks to one of these type engines. I don't know how I did it, but I'm not doing that this time because I didn't really like that retrofit. So let me find what I need. Just wanted to tell you everything's going smoothly so far. 4 bolts is super easy, and then the bolt under there. So we've got it mounted. It looks even under the bottom down there, excuse me. And so we're just gonna pop carburetor and all that good stuff onto it. As far as I know, this thing's got great compression, should run awesome. It's a little bit on the, it's gonna be a little bit, it's not gonna be underpowered, but it will be not quite, nowhere near as powerful as that V-twin, but it will get the job done on this. So let me figure out some of the wiring situation and a couple other things, and we will continue on here in just a second. Alrighty, I'll put the, I took off the flywheel here. Obviously you see a bunch of crusties and stuff around the magneto and the coil, because this thing has not been running forever and a day, I don't think. One little wiring thing, look, the magneto plugs right in. I should not have any trouble, famous last words, because the other one was attached to an ignition module. So it did all of its grounding out on this ignition module here that I do not need on the flathead, but it still has the same plug in. It just has a little loop there showing power instead of ground. You can see we've got 2 wires going there, and then I'm going to cross-reference this on another mower over here, and hopefully I am correct. If I'm not, then I'm about to find out. We're all about to find out. So it plugged into the ignition module, plugged into this orange and yellow wire on this mower. And if we want to triple check, we'll triple check on this Craftsman over here. It's got the 21 horse. Plugs into the orange and the red, just like exact same plug with it going in there. So I shouldn't have any trouble with the magneto, or as long as it's good, the magneto. I shouldn't have any trouble with that either. Shouldn't have any trouble with the stator as long as the stator is good on it. One thing with the wiring I do need to do is that I don't have a connector. So this is the original one which has the dual plug wires on it, right? And then the gray wire for the kill. I've already got all this on this mower. All I got to do is I could either splice this connector off. I'm going to see what kind of wire connections I have, and I might just wire nut them together, or find some hooks that'll connect in there. I don't know what I have in my stash. Let me see what I have in my stash. I'll come back and see what we can do here. Alright, so I ended up just pulling the connector and putting some wire nuts on it. I will put electrical tape on that, don't worry. Next order of business, I looked, although I found a couple of goodies that's going to help me out on my next project for my for another engine swap I got coming up in terms of wiring and whatnot. I did not find a single cylinder muffler for a John Deere, which I know I had at one point, but obviously I have since taken it to the scrapper in my younger days when I knew that I wasn't working on riding mowers anymore. But guess what? I am. Looks like I got 2 3/8, 2 quarters, 5/16, maybe another couple 3/8. That's going to get this exhaust off, and we're going to see if we can retrofit this MTD exhaust onto it, because it has what I need. And it looks like the downpipe is essentially where I need it to go. You know what I mean? See, it fits right on there. Wish I could just put this downpipe, but obviously I've got a gaping hole over here, so I've got to put another exhaust on it. Let me get this old exhaust off, as long as I can get this back out of the hole here. There we go. Get this old exhaust off, and I'll see what I can do in terms of retrofitting that MTD exhaust onto this. Alrighty, I've gotten all of the bolts out. I forgot there was a third bolt back there for the exhaust. The bracket out on the side here, it's laying right there. I also took these 2 bolts out of the side of each side. I don't think I had to do that, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have anything holding this back. So now this exhaust has 4 tabs on it, 1, 2 right here, and then 3, 4. This little housing has 4 tabs on them. So you just gotta lift it up and down. Take that off. Makes me wonder if I can just pop this in here. Yeah, I guess so. What I'll have to do, let's see. I think I can make this exhaust work. Bolt pattern is. The bolt pattern is the same on the front, but not on the back. I wonder if I can get by with that. I'm gonna take my impact here with my that's a 10 mil. Take these bolts out. Nope. All right, I'll get that big impact. I'll get the 4th bolt out. I'll see if I can retrofit the bracket to work on this MTD muffler. Might have a couple little holes on the top of it here, but it'll be under it. And I could probably drill. Honestly, I can probably drill a couple of holes in it, but it's right at the little spacer, so I don't know how that might work. It's an experiment. Let's see what we've got. Alrighty, y'all, I'm gonna leave this little shield off for now. However, let me show you what I gotta do here. See, the exhaust actually comes out on the opposite end of where the old one did. So I just gotta cut out a hole about like that, except on the other side. I probably just cut it from like right here to right there. And take it off that way. For the purposes of just starting it, we'll leave it like that. I have already put the downpipe back on it and put the gasket back in for the exhaust. So, and I guess I could go ahead and put these 2 10 mil bolts back in because they actually hold on the frame rail to the frame. They don't have anything to do with the exhaust, I don't think. So I'll pop those back on. I'll tighten them down. And then what's next? I gotta figure out the fuel situation. What I might do first though is see if I can get it to fire on starting fluid. Put a battery in it just to see if it'll work. If it does, great. Then we'll keep on keeping on with it. If not, I'll diagnose why it's not getting any spark. So let me do that before I forget about it. And continue on with this. Alrighty, y'all. I got battery cables hooked up to it with the exhaust. I mean, how much oil may or may not be in it? Probably nothing. There's really no oil in it. But what I'm going to do really quickly before I pursue the fuel deal is see if I can get this thing cranked and run. Spoiler alert, I did bump the key real quick before I picked up the camera, but let's see what we got. Let's see. I'm only gonna run it for a brief second if it cranks. Look at that. That's fantastic. And I've got, let's see, I've got no melting wires that I can see, no hot wires or anything, so that's awesome. All right, now it's not a huge deal, but the wild card of this is going to be figuring out the way I'm going to put the fuel pump on. So let me do a little bit of investigating before I continue with that. As soon as I figure that out, I'll put the fuel pump on it. I'm going to see if I can save this Walboro carburetor. I don't know if it's in good shape or not. I have not even taken it off. It came off of a mower that I had just sitting outside. But I had borrowed that little air fuel piece for another lawnmower earlier. And so I'm going to drill that back in, see what happens. But it's running. It will run. We know that. Whether I need to put a new carburetor on it or something. I still have to figure out the throttle linkages and all that good stuff. We'll get there. And the choke, I think I'm going to make it just a manual choke as opposed to tying it in with the throttle, just to make it a little bit easier since I already have those connections there. And then we'll continue on after that. This thing's going to run like a champ, I can already tell. I love these like quiet package 14.5s. They are good little engines for what they are. So we'll go ahead and do all that real quick, and I'll catch back up with y'all in just a second. I just wanted to show you that it started and ran, so we're in good shape so far. Haven't done one of these in a while, so second guess yourself sometimes. But alrighty, y'all. So this is another experiment, so to speak. I was able to mount the fuel pump to an existing bolt over here for the engine cover, and it's on there pretty sturdy now. I've got this fuel line going over to the carburetor. I've got this fuel line coming up, and it's going over to the pump. And then I did a vacuum line. I don't know if this is going to provide enough pressure or not, but I drilled a hole in the dipstick and was able to wedge a vacuum line in there, so I can't get it out. Wedge the vacuum line in there, and so hopefully that'll allow me enough crankcase pressure through this to run that fuel pump and to run this engine. So we'll find out. Like I said, this is kind of an experiment. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. This is the biggest wild card in the whole thing, is because I know this engine did not come with originally come with a fuel pump type setup. So we'll see what happens here. We'll see if we can get enough gas going to it in order for it to run. So my next order of business, I'm going to go ahead and take this thing off the jack stands. I'm going to take this plastic piece of the carburetor assembly off, which is just 2 7/16 inch on the side here. Take that off. That way I can access, I gotta take the carburetor off, that way I can access the throttle cable. See if I can find something to hold that down over there, because I don't know if I've got that or not. I'll have to check my bucket real quick. No, not that I see. I don't have one. I'll have to check another mower or something. Or I steal it off the V-twin right there, which I might do. So let me address that situation. I'm going to put oil in it. It's very low. It's got a little bit, but it needs a good 20 This probably needs a good half of what it usually does. So it probably needs a good cord in it still. And we're going to crank this thing up, see if we've got any action before I put another carburetor on it if I need to. Fun little experiment. I hope it works. Alrighty, y'all, topped it off with oil and all that good stuff. I think I put these back on right. Looks like that's the vent area there. I actually had to turn this fuel pump around in order for all this to work semi-properly. Obviously, this is not the final setup for it, but it's a setup that it should work. In theory, it should work. So we'll see. Let's. I'm gonna put y'all on the tripod. I'm gonna see if I can crank this over. Again, I don't know if the carburetor is good on it or not. We'll check it here in a minute. I just want to see if the thing can crank. It's pumping. It is pumping. Yeah, oh, it's got plenty of pressure in it. Wow. Cool. Alright. Y'all probably can't hear it because of the fan, but man, that thing's got some killer pressure to it. So I've got that issue resolved, which is awesome. I may have a little tiny leak out the dipstick because I can't get that thing exactly set, but everything's good from the fuel pump over to the carburetor, so it tells me that I've got a carburetor issue. Carburetor's old. I figured that was probably the case anyways. So let me take this carburetor off. I've already basically got it off as it is, but I'll show you this. I mean, look how much it's spraying out right there. It's got like fuel pressure like no other, which is fantastic. That was the big hurdle that we needed to cross. So I need what do I need? 5/16. 5/16 will get me off here, these two bolts, and just take the linkages off. I'm going to slap a new carburetor on. I got one right here ready to rock and roll. Just need to put it on, and we'll put it on, put this, let's see if we got a good running engine here. We have a good running engine. We'll see if it runs forever, or runs, you know, more than for 2 seconds. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll catch you in just a second. Alrighty, I'm going to give this Walbur a fighting chance. Took the solenoid off. Of course, it was stuck. Look at that bowl right there. It's just atrocious. I got the solenoid free, the little anti-backfire. Don't know if I necessarily need it in there any with the fuel pump set up, but if you look in there, it looks a little rough, but it's clear. My jet on the side, though, however, is clogged up, so I gotta fix that. Float looks okay. Bowl just needs a good cleaning, and this top area of the carburetor needs a good cleaning. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that. I'll put it back, or I'll show you the finished product, and then I'll put it back on, see if we have any luck with this. I think we might. We'll see what we have, because at first I didn't have a needle that would work, so I know I wasn't getting any fuel down into the bowl of the carburetor, which means it wasn't getting into the carburetor to get up to the intake to fire it. So let's see what we got. Alrighty, y'all, we're gonna give this carburetor a chance. I actually just remember I haven't punched a little wire through this to get it open, although yeah, I just need to punch that wire through. Let me show you the bowl though. Much cleaner. Could have an ultrasonic cleaner, but obviously I don't at this time. I may get one eventually. The only thing I'm worried about is the needle in the seat, if that doesn't work. But everything else looks clean. I hope I can save this Walboro, because there's so much better carburetors. Let me put it all back together, take that jet and clean it out as well, and then we will continue on. I'll put this thing back on and we'll see if we can have a good running lawnmower. Alright, I've put that clean carburetor on there. We'll see. If this doesn't work, we'll put a new one on there. So let's see what we got. Pardon the fan, it's kind of a hot day, so got to keep it going so I don't sweat my butt off. I also don't have the choke hooked up, so I'm going to give it a little bit of spray. Oh. Did I plug that in? One more time. Oh, come on. I have that charger on the battery. Of course, I get it right at the point where I think I'm going to start it, and it does that. So let me throw some charging cables on it, see if I can get this thing turned over. Give me just a second. Like I said, we got it so close, and now I got it on the charger. Let's see if I can crank it now. Keep priming it real quick. Almost there. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to let it sit for a couple of minutes. I think what's happening is I think that carb is done. I don't think it's getting enough fuel past the needle and seat in order for it to run right. So I'm gonna give it a couple minutes. I'm gonna crank it up. I'll see if it'll stay running for me. If not, then I'll go back and probably put a new carburetor on it. If that doesn't fix it, then we'll have to go back and investigate the fuel pump. But we know the fuel pump is pumping pretty good. Here, I'll show you one more time. I know it's getting fuel in there, so All right, it finally quit. Woo! All right. So I think I'm getting enough gas, because if I wasn't getting enough gas, the choke wouldn't have any effect on it. So I gotta get out of the garage. My eyes are irritating me from all that running. Whew. But what I'm gonna do, y'all saw how I took the carburetor off. I'm gonna put another carburetor on it. I'm gonna see if that helps matters any. I wonder if it'll crank back up. If it's got enough juice in the battery. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just getting way too much. It's just not getting the right fuel amount in it. Thing is leaking out needle and seat too, which doesn't surprise me. So let me put that new carburetor on real quick, and then I will I'll give it one more test, and we'll end this part. Move on to part 4, putting everything back on it. Alrighty, y'all, new carburetor's on. It will take a second for it to suck up fuel through there. May not be the greatest fuel in the world. It was the fuel that came in it, but it was running. It was allowing the 20 horsepower that was on it to run great on one cylinder. So let's see if we got enough juice. Almost sounds like the governor's a little out of whack on it. Oops. Ooh. Sure run pretty fast, I know that. Skirt some tires with it, how about that? Again, 868 hours. settles down great. Put this in the garage a little bit. Oh yeah, I knew it was gonna backfire. They always do when they ain't been run for a while. Cool. That's blows away my expectations, honestly, for what it needs to do, which is fantastic. I did not think, I was thinking about a V-twin, and I was like, well, do I try and rebuild it? Because I don't know if there's something wrong internally with it or anything like that. And so I was like, I had this 14.5 back there in the back. Seemed like it did fine, so, or seemed like it looked like it would be a good engine. So I said, this is a viable candidate for it. The mower itself looks not very appealing. I will spray some John Deere green on it. Probably blow off a bunch of the paint just out in the backyard or something. I'm going to end part 1 here, though. We got a good running, driving John Deere with a new engine on it. It's beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm gonna figure out what I want to do with the choke cable. I have to put the air filter and all that stuff back on it before I do that, which I need to find a better air filter, but I don't know if I have one here. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all on this is essentially part 3 of this series, and I'll catch y'all on part 4. We're going to put the deck on. We're going to get this thing cutting. We might have to sort out a governor issue if it doesn't sort itself out here in the next little bit. But apart from that, we're in good shape. Again, thank y'all for watching. Y'all can catch me at Ellis Mowers 09 on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll catch you right here on YouTube for the next video. See you then.